So what actually happens after you've applied for a job? After you click the apply button, sometimes it can feel that your CV's just gone into a black hole. But what actually happens behind the scenes? So recruiters use a piece of software called an applicant tracking system, or ATS. There are hundreds of different applicant tracking systems out there. Some of the most common platforms that recruiters use are platforms like Workday, Taleo, Workable, iSims, and Greenhouse. But they all pretty much do the same thing. And that is, they give a recruiter a list of all of their open positions and all of the candidates that have applied for each one. And that is literally all it does. It's basically a massive digital filing cabinet. So after you've applied for the job, your application, your details, your CV will be stored against a record for whatever job it is that you've applied for. So what happens next? First, you might get auto-rejected. If you get auto-rejected, this isn't anything to do with your CV. The ATS does not reject your application based on your CV. If you are auto-rejected, it is based on the answers to questions you gave during the application process. As an example, if the application form asks questions such as your salary expectations, whether you need a visa to work, whether you've got a driving license, or it asks for certain qualifications, the answers that you give to those types of questions will determine whether you get auto-rejected or not, because there is no point a recruiter actually reading your CV if you don't meet the minimum requirements of that role. But your CV is not the reason you get auto-rejected. Next, a recruiter will review your CV. Now, how quickly that happens after you apply depends on how busy the recruiter is or how urgent the role is. Or sometimes they might not even review it until after the application deadline is passed. Not all jobs have application deadlines, but quite a lot do. Now, recruiters get hundreds of applications, and about 80% of them are completely irrelevant and just not a good match for the role at all. Now, if a recruiter's got a lot of vacancies, which most do, they will spend 5 or 6 seconds reviewing your CV to see if you are a good match for the role or not. Now, 5 or 6 seconds might not seem like a lot, but it actually is when you're sat there and you're reviewing hundreds of CVs at a time. What they're looking for in that first 5 or 6 seconds is your most recent experience and your skills. If you can convince the recruiter within those first few seconds that you are a good fit for the role, then they will read the rest of your CV. If not, they'll click the reject button and you will get an email that tells you you've been unsuccessful. If you do need help with your CV, check out the link in my bio. There's a completely free CV template, which is helping people get job interviews. Once the recruiter's reviewed all of the applications, they will have a short list of candidates that they want to speak to about the position. They'll either just call you and have a pre-screening call there and then, or they'll drop you an email to rearrange a time to have that pre-screening call. Now, the mistake that a lot of people make is they don't treat this pre-screening call like a job interview. And that's exactly what it is. It is a job interview because the recruiter is going to make a decision after that call whether they are going to progress you to the next stage of the process or not. So make sure that you treat that call like an interview. Now, during that call, what the recruiter will do is try and understand a bit more about you, a bit more about your experience, and tell you more about the role. They'll cover basic requirements like your salary expectations and your notice period. Make sure at this point you are really clear with your salary expectations and what you are looking for, because there is no point in either of you progressing down the rest of the process if your salary expectations aren't in line with the budget for the role. So make sure you're really clear with that from the very beginning. After that call, if the recruiter is happy that you were a good match for the role, they will then progress you to the next stage of the process, where the recruiter will sit down with the hiring manager, or they will send them a short list of all of the candidates that they've spoken to, along with their CV and any notes that they've taken during that call with you during that pre-screening session. Now, this is where things can drag out a little bit, because either one, the hiring manager just hates recruiting and it's not top of their priority list, or two, they're busy. And again, recruiting isn't at the top of their priority list. So recruiters will quite often have to chase down hiring managers multiple times to get feedback on the shortlist and decide which of those candidates, if any, they would like to interview. Now, if you've built up a really good relationship with the recruiter during that pre-screening call, the recruiter will quite often go to bat for you. If the hiring manager says, "Oh, I'm not entirely sure about this candidate," the recruiter will tell the manager all of the reasons why they should interview you. So it's a really good idea to have a good relationship with that recruiter. Eventually, the hiring manager agrees who they want to see from the shortlist, and then the recruiter will reach out to you to arrange the interview and all that type of stuff. Now, I'll talk through the interview process and the offer process in another video, which I'll call part 2. The whole point of this video was to let you know what happens once you've applied for the role, those early stages of the whole recruitment process. So remember, if you get auto-rejected straight after applying for the role, it's because of the answers you gave to those questions in the application form, not because AI or the ATS is automatically rejecting your CV. That doesn't happen. If you get no feedback after you've applied, then a few things might have happened. 1, the recruiter just hasn't reviewed your CV yet because they've been that busy. Or 2, they have reviewed your CV, but you're in the maybe pile. They've got other candidates on their shortlist they want to speak to first, and you're in the maybe pile. So you haven't been rejected yet, so you've not had the email to tell you that they're not progressing, but you haven't had the call from the recruiter yet because you're in the maybe pile. They're waiting to see how those calls go first. So it's always worth following up your application with a message to the recruiter, because that might just nudge you into the yes pile where they will have a conversation with you. And remember, that first conversation you have with a recruiter is an interview. The recruiter can decide not to progress your application based solely on that call. So make sure you take it seriously and treat it like an interview. So that's part 1. Don't forget to check the links in my bio where there's loads of free resources to help you with your job search, including that CV template I mentioned earlier, which is really helping people land job interviews. It makes it really easy for the recruiter to read, and it really calls out your key experience and your key skills. Sign up to my newsletter, loads of exclusive content, and make sure you subscribe and hit the follow button as well, because part 2 of this video will land later this week. And good luck with the job search. Cheers.